Hey friends, Maggie here. I'm excited today. I am just taking you through a quick tutorial. We've had a request lately on the platform for more educational tutorials. And first of all, Jen and I love that. So we love to create these for you guys. We love to nerd out on certain topics. So I really hope you enjoy this. So for me, this is we're going to be talking about activating the glutes today. Now, I was talking to my husband about this, and he was like, "You should call it something more fun, like how to how to help." Like get rid of low back pain. I was like, that's good. I was like, I'm just so obsessed with teaching people to turn on their glutes that I forget that some of us aren't really familiar with that. We're not really familiar with what all that means, what role our glutes really play in our everyday life. So that is the purpose of this tutorial today, to really help impart to you how integral and important, like healthy functioning of our glutes are for just all the movements we do. So important in balance postures for yoga. So important if you have always wanted to be like, how do people get like in a straight line in Warrior 3? Like my legs always much lower than my hips and my arms. All of those types of things. Walking, running, the glutes play a major important role in all of that. So I'm going to talk through a couple different things that I tend to see in my clients and in students that I work with. I've also worked with a physical therapist for a little while, and that's one of her big focuses as well. And so I've gotten to see from her teaching me just kind of how to notice some compensations that people will make in their bodies when their glutes aren't firing properly. So that's my hope for today. I hope you guys really enjoy. So the first thing I will show you is when we think about actually the process of our gait and walking, we want to think about this kind of, yes, we want this like heel toe action with the foot. But what we want to think about higher up the chain is that we're taking this step and this back leg is opening and lengthening along the front of the hip. So we're getting psoas and hip flexor length and opening. But this back glute, like my glute is already firing in anticipation of helping me propel forward for the next step. So that back leg is always in hip extension. And when we're in hip extension is when we want the glute to fire. And that, again, is going to help us have like a more steady, balanced, and stable gait and walk. I also personally, if you're familiar with a wonderful teacher that I personally love named Laura Hyman, and she's a physical therapist yoga teacher. She has lots of great glute focused classes. And one of the things that she really focuses on is how important the glutes are, and she encompasses your glutes in your core. So we tend to think of core being just this cylindrical portion of our torso, but she also incorporates the glutes in that because how important it is for stability and balance. So when we're thinking then about this walk, this gait, we want to make sure that we free up the front of the hips in order to get this hip extension. And what I see a lot of is people have this tilting action of their pelvis. So if you think about the bony points on your pelvis, you can put your fingertips to that point. And if you feel like the bowl of your pelvis is tipping forward, typically, not always, but a lot of the time, when you're doing that in a walking position, then what happens is your back will take most of the kind of the force and the pressure, and you're kind of getting that compression of your lumbar spine, and that can lead to some discomfort over time. So ways that I see that then play out on the mat for people is typically the the position where I see this happening the most is in positions like, and if you've taken some of my classes, you've probably heard me try to do like a very, very mini tutorial of this, because I think it's so important and pertains to a lot of us. And it really changed my practice a lot. I'm definitely still a person that tends to dump and collapse into my low back and not maintain like core integration. And so where I see this happening the most is typically in like a sunbird position, or if we're doing like, if you've ever done like a lifting here. So what can happen is in this sunbird position, or I've also heard this pose called bird dog position, then what that looks like, or how that kind of plays out, is the hips tend to be kind of droopy, and the action of lifting is coming from the spine. And so it's kind of this collapsing in the low back and the hips kind of dropping inwards. And that to me is typically a sign of that a person is having some trouble firing in their glutes. We can also see this play out in a bridge position as well. If I tell someone to come into a bridge pose and they have trouble lengthening their tailbone, so this position, so see how I'm really rounded here in my spine. This is actually extremely uncomfortable for me, because now my body's like, no, like that's not what we want to be doing here, as I'm feeling this all along my back muscles, and my back is really taking the brunt of this posture, as opposed to when I lengthen. So watch the back of my hips here. When I lengthen my tailbone towards my knees and find kind of more of a neutral pelvic position, then I'm really able to, again, isolate that hip extension movement and feel my glutes start to fire a lot more properly and actively. So let's come back to, if you're joining me and you're trying to kind of feel some of this in your body, let's come back to the tabletop position. So if I'm trying to retrain the neural pathways and like create new neural pathways in my brain and in my body to try to change this compensation, one thing you might try doing is coming into your tabletop, and instead of just shooting your arms and legs out into sunbird and kind of coming up into it, I like to start just one movement at a time. So I'll take my leg back and then lift into my belly, almost like I'm doing slight cat pose with my back. So it's not as exaggerated as a cat pose, but it's working towards that in order to keep my spine more neutral. And then I can play with just lifting the heel towards the level of the hips. And then if I want to move higher, that's when I'm coming into true hip extension and really starting to feel my glute fire up. Then I can focus on lengthening. So you will have some spine if you're doing a lift, or if you're kind of coming here and opening into a half bow pose. Obviously, the spine is involved in that, and the back muscles are involved in those movements. But I want you to try to really focus on feeling and isolating sensation into really truly like your butt muscles, right? So that's a really good example that I see a lot of. Another one would be, say we're in a side lying pose, or you might see people doing this standing as well. And they really struggle to abduct their hip. So taking from center line outwards is, that movement is abduction. So the outer glute muscles like glute min and glute med help with that and assist with that movement. And so if I'm here, what I'll see a lot of is, so here's my hip point. So if I'm doing true abduction, that's not really moving too much in relation to the movement. I'm able to isolate the movement of the head of my femur bone moving in the socket, as opposed to what I'll see a lot of is, now watch my hip point, I'm bringing it, and I'm kind of doing like a side crunch to do the movement. So now my obliques, QLs, like low back muscles, are starting to really help with that movement. So standing up, what that looks like is coming here. So it's a little bit more, there's hip hiking happening, as opposed to, it's much harder standing. I typically need something to hold on to because it's a lot harder. But as opposed to there, which is a little bit more isolated. And I feel that like really quickly in my outer hip muscles. So those are a lot of the main things that I see happening. Other things are just other muscles like your psoas and your quads trying to overcompensate, or your TFL, which is over here on the side of your hip, having those muscles can overcompensate. That's something you'd really need to probably go see a physical therapist for, to see if they can kind of help identify that compensatory movement pattern for you. So what does this all mean? Hopefully we have this is what you need in order to, move differently moving forward is knowledge. So a couple tips of how I started to really feel into this in my own body is, for when I'm in a bridge pose, especially right when I wake up in the morning, I can notice this feeling still in my own body, is I'll lift up, and if I can really feel like, typically what happens as well is one glute can fire faster than the other. Just lots of different things can contribute to that. But for me, it's typically my left glute has a little bit more trouble firing fully than my left or my right. So I'll start by just tapping. Tap, 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 tap. And that sounds silly and it's really simple, but it actually makes a huge difference. It's really just creating this feedback loop and this location of sensation and awareness for your body, for your brain rather, to start to create a more solid and created neural pathway to that muscle group. So that's something really simple you can try. The next thing would be recording yourself. Now, everyone hates recording themselves. I hate recording myself, even though I do this a lot, obviously. And then I have to watch back my videos. No one really loves doing that, but it's really, really helpful to notice like your movement patterns. So a good way you could try this out is you can take my Take 10 booty burn class, so the quick 10-minute class, and record yourself doing that class, and then look back, and you can kind of watch it, at a quicker speed maybe, and then look at specific movements and notice if you're seeing, compensatory movements like hiking your hip or dumping in your low back or tilting your pelvis too far forward or too far back. So that's a great thing. And then my last recommendation is, if this is something like, if you hear everything from this tutorial and then you go and take the booty burn class and you're just like, wow, I am thinking that I really struggle with this, then I would highly suggest going to a physical therapist that specializes in dry needling as a treatment. It's essentially like they stick a needle into the belly of the muscle. It's a specific training that physical therapists can receive. And then it's even better if somebody, the physical therapist, attaches electric currents to that, and then it'll pump like a frequency, and it'll spasm your muscle to help that muscle turn back on, and really great for blood flow to that area. So that has been extremely helpful for me and my healing journey. So you can check out a physical therapist in your area that specializes in that, and that could be a really great tool as well. So I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. Please leave a comment below if you have any additional questions, if you want to see more classes that isolate and focus on glute engagement and how that can serve for low back pain, knee pain, all of those things, because it is the middle of the chain of the upper body and the lower body. The hips are right in the center. And so when the glutes are out of whack, things above and below can really be impacted. So hope this has been helpful. Lots of love to you all, and I'll see you on our next class.